Format for our event today will be opening comments by our panel members, and then we hand over the mics to our press to ask questions. As is usual for these press conferences, the members of the press can ask 2 questions to start with, and then as we make our way around, if there are any more questions and more time left back, you can ask additional questions. So this morning we have Mr. Adam Pyle. He is the Deputy Director for the Overseas Territories Department in the FCDO. He'll be making opening comments first. Then we will move on to the Honorable Premier Joseph Farrell, who will be making his comments after that, and we will finish with His Excellency the Governor Andrew Pierce, who will be making the final comments, and then we will hand over to the press. So without further ado, I'll hand over now to Mr. Pyle.
Great. Thank you, Nesta. Good morning, everyone. And it's really fantastic to be back in Montserrat, and really warm welcome we've had from everyone, so thank you very much. When we've been here, we started in quarantine, which was interesting, and then we have spent a lot of time both virtually and once we're out of quarantine meeting as many people as we can. So we've been meeting, spending a lot of time with the government. I'm grateful for the opposition for giving us time to meet with them, but we've also been meeting with businesses, NGOs, faith leaders, so it's been really good to get a feel for what's going on in the community. And I would like to say thank you to the Government of Montserrat for all of the work they've put into this financial aid mission. The quality of what we've seen, the data analysis coming from the officials and the public service has been fantastic. And what strikes me is for a country of 4,500, if you looked at a similar sized town in the UK, you wouldn't get the kind of range of experience and passion and dedication that you get in the public service in Montserrat. So we've had presentations on some really technical issues, kind of, balancing budgets, geothermal energy. It's just really impressive, that range of skill and dedication in the public service in Montserrat. And I know they've been working really hard to keep the people of Montserrat safe during the pandemic. We've got a really good working relationship with the ministers here in Montserrat. To be frank, they've pushed us really hard on and made us understand what the everyday Montserratian has been experiencing, not only during the pandemic, but also what it's like on an island with issues around access. I think we've achieved quite a lot over the last year with the ministerial team and the public service here. If you take, for example, the £30 million capital programme we've been investing, actually we've got a lot achieved recently. So we've got the fibre optic cable in, the runway's been resurfaced, you'll have seen the control tower's gone up, there's a hot mix plant procured for renovating the roads, and we're finally progressing plans for the hospital, so moving that forward after quite a long time. What are we going to take away from our time in Montserrat? What are our observations? I think, like everyone around the world, people have been experiencing some really tough times with the pandemic, but it feels like on Montserrat they've actually just exacerbated a lot of the issues that everyday people have been experiencing, not least in the cost of living. Going into the supermarkets is absolutely terrifying when you compare it to the prices we pay in the United Kingdom, seeing what people here are having to pay for household goods. Access, both by sea and air. I know there's kind of a lot of passion to get that sorted. I know the access team here do a fantastic job. We're working with them to see how we can improve the access to the island, both for goods and for people. It's very clear to us, and the Premier's been very clear with us on this, the need to sort the port. That needs to be progressed and brought to a resolution after a very long time. So I'm hoping we can come with a final solution on that very soon. And I'm very pleased to say, after working with the Premier, that we've agreed to draw up outline bid for a new UK capital investment programme to succeed the existing one, the £30 million one at the moment. As it stands, the UK provides around 65% of GOM's current budget as well. And just to reassure people, we're committed to doing that for the long term. The UK has a long-standing commitment to the people of Montserrat. There are challenges. We don't resolve everything on these visits and meetings. We hear what people are saying on public sector pay, and we're working with the Premier and his team on that one. Maintenance, there is a lot of backlog of maintenance we need to have a look at and work that through. And working with the ministerial team here to move forward geothermal energy, bringing in an expertise and see that actually come to fruition. On the COVID front, the UK has supplied the PPE, the vaccines, the testing equipment, and some staff and other things, but it's really heartening to see what the medical team here have done in Montserrat. And if you'd have told me 2-3 years ago that the team on a small island community would be able to set up a PCR testing facility, I don't think anyone would have believed it. But dealing with some really complex technology there, to have that established in a small community like that is fantastic. So I think the team should be really proud of it. It's great. I was at the airport with the Premier and the Governor yesterday to see the Pfizer vaccine arrive on the islands. That's great to see that actually arrive. Omicron is not like anything we've seen before. It's spreading like wildfire. It will get to Montserrat. That is just going to happen, sadly. And I think we all need to remember we're in a race against time now, because the Omicron variant is a lot more virulent. So get boosted. I've got my booster shot coming up when I arrive back in the UK. And just to conclude, 2 things. To reiterate my thanks to the Premier and his team for all the hard work they've done, for making us feel what the Montserratians feel, really drumming that home, so I can go back and report back to my ministers. But finally, I just want to also thank the Governor, because he's in the last few months of his tenure here. And I know he's worked tirelessly for the people of Montserrat. And what people here don't see is every day I have the Governor on the phone or emailing me kind of the advocate, the invisible advocate you don't see, but within the UK government, reminding me Montserrat exists and the needs of the people of Montserrat. So thank you for all you've done, and you've worked tirelessly for the island. You will all, I hope, like Sarah Tucker, the new Governor who's been announced. I know the Premier is particularly pleased that she's got some private sector experience as well. But thank you very much.
Good day, everyone. Thank you, Adam. This financial aid mission is held against the backdrop of the Omicron virus variant, of course, and the rising costs of living in the world, and including Montserrat, as a result of the high energy prices, high fuel, shipping costs, and of course results in the price of goods on the shelf. And so I want to again extend a warm welcome to the team from the UK. Certainly a pleasure. We had some reservation initially as to whether they could come in person or whether we should have a Zoom. I think it was better for us to meet in person, and I'm happy that we did. Of course, they spent their 5 days in conference, as I said, and we were able to had some, in the initial stage, we had Zoom or virtual meetings, and then we met face-to-face. Very productive meeting, may I say. I know you will ask me what exactly, but we will talk about that. Over the past 4 or 5 days, we have had intense discussions from all aspects of government in terms of the budgetary support and the pressure that is being borne on the budget, and whether there's any room for an expansion on that. That's for neither of us. There's no commitment on that. So, but we'll work together to see how best we can advance that. We spoke at length in terms of public service, remuneration packages, and in light of the current cost of living, and also the implication of that cost of living on low-income families, and especially in light of nutritional status of our family members or vulnerable people. And so that came out very forcefully. We spoke on energy, and you're aware of the number of blackouts that we have had over the past months in terms of electricity. And we had a presentation from the MOL board yesterday morning outlining what is happening and a strategy going forward. We agreed on some options that are available to us, and we will go back and have a look at those options and determine how best we can work with MOL to alleviate the difficulties they're having, while at the same time focusing on our renewable energy goals that we have set ourselves as a government. We also spoke about the need for interim financing. We have CPREC 1, And SEPRI 1, as you're aware, is a 5-year capital project. And as a government, we are concerned that we have expedited, we have basically as a government have moved the process much forward than I think anticipated by some people. The speed at which we have implemented SEPRI 1 is fantastic. We have just one major project left in that program. Of course, there is school, blocks L&M, and they're working on that now. And the only major project that's left is the hospital. And we are now we should be going out for final design shortly. And so by the end of next year, we should be completing those, at least starting the hospital project. And that means that there's nothing else left in SEPRI 1. What I'm pleased to report is that we have had a commitment from Adam and his team that immediately after this sitting, government will sit down and look at what elements, what components they can put into a SEPRI 2 program. And what we have suggested to the team is that whereas SEPRI 1 was a hard program where you had infrastructure capital projects, replacing items that were destroyed, we're now looking at a combination of both hard and soft projects so that whatever we put in that SEPRI 2 will in fact result in some economic growth for the country, whereas not just building structures, but rather creating avenues for employment and sustained growth in the economy. So this is a good sign. We also spoke about in between SEPRI 1, there's some immediate programs that we need to look at, like sewage, the sewage at Drummonds and the one at Lookout and Little Bay and Davy Hill. They need some work done immediately. These are health hazards. So we have spoken to the FCDO team about it, and we will talk in the weeks and months to come in terms of how we can get that done. That is, the team has accepted the fact that it's critical for us to work on those, and so we will move forward on those in time to come. We also discussed Social Security, and we're all aware that Social Security is a critical element of our social network, and FCDO is aware of what we have been doing over the past months, and they have started to agree with us in moving forward that that the fund must be sustained, and that whatever has to be done by government must be done and will be done by us to make sure that the fund is viable beyond a certain time. We didn't speak on the private sector entity, but I spoke to you as press sometime before about our mission to establish a private sector entity to drive our economy, and that is ongoing. The main problem I see for the country going forward is the ability for us to draw down on funds outside of the FCDO. Over the years, we have depended solely on FCDO to provide us with funds for development. What we have learned over the past months is that there are other avenues from which the government of Munster can tap into to acquire funds to do other things. And so we have agreed that we will work along with the FCDO. The minister, of course, Adam, have committed himself to setting up this cross-party team in Whitehall so that we can work across government and ministries to be able to draw down. What we need in Munster right now is that human capacity to develop those programs and projects and business cases so that we can draw down on funds like the UK climate change funding and Darwin funds and those things. The application forms are complicated. We know the funds are out there, but we need someone to work with us, both the Ministry of Agriculture and ourselves, to draw down on those funds. And in the coming months, I've indicated to FCDO and the Deputy Governor's Office that we will be drawing down on TC funding, or TC positions, so that we can establish some posts to help us to do just that, because it is important that we look towards development rather than just the ordinary things. And so, of course, capacity is one of the main things that we want to do, and we are going to do that. We spoke about geothermal and energy, of course, and the minister, as you know, when he was in London, met with the Minister of Energy in the UK, and DFID, FCDO have provided funds for the geothermal wells. We as a government are working with some private sector individuals, and we hope that we can get some commitments to establish our energy. You know, we have a commitment for Munster to go green by 2030, which I think is ambitious, but I think it's doable with ourselves and the United government. It's doable. And so we have the solar farm already, and we are looking at that. We intend to go green. And as I said to the minister a few days ago, that by Munster becoming the first OT in the Caribbean to go green, will make both the UK and Munster proud. And I think it's a goal that we have to work towards. You had asked about the port project. There's no definite commitment. There's no final word on it, but we are, as a government, we are confident that FCDO is doing their best to provide the shortfall funding that we need. We don't have a definite commitment yet, but we know they're working assiduously to help us to provide those funds, and we are basically positive that we will get those funding for the port project going forward. These are basically what I think I have to offer this time. You'll draw me out or draw us out as we go forward. As I said, the team is not in a position to say we're going to give you X, Y, Z, but I believe that in their pocket they have something that they want to deliver when they get back to London, and we will hope that we can get that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Adam. Thank you. Thank you very much, ladies and gents of the media. I'd really very warmly endorse everything that my colleague Adam and the Premier here have said about the FAM. This is my fourth FAM, and it is absolutely by a country mile the best. And that's primarily because of the honest, direct mood of the discussions this time round. The Premier commented that he had noticed when he was back for the JMC in the UK a month or so ago, together with this particular FAM, that there seemed to have been a bit of a sea change in the relationship, and I've sensed that as well. It might be premature to think that part of it is due to the merger, but I do believe that some of it may have come about because of that, a shift in the sort of unity of the approach. In any case, it's been really good talks, some quite tough talks at times, but I found them by some way the best. And I think it's brought home too that for Montserrat, there's something about this island and this community that you need to come and see it to really get it. If you try to do it all virtually or from overseas, you just can't quite get there. So I would flag that. I would pick up also Adam's and the Premier's points about CIPREG 2. In other words, the commitment to start looking at and thinking about the scope of a further major capital investment programme for Montserrat. I think that is really necessary. The £30 million CIPREG 1, the first programme, has been really good, and we've really implemented it with pace. It's gone a long way, but it is really primarily about repairing and upgrading key infrastructure. Moving forward, we need to go deeper than that, so I think that's an excellent outcome of these FAM talks and an important one. Ditto on the sewage front. Having been given a sewage tour, I probably should have done that earlier in my time here, but having had a sewage tour a week or so ago, I think it was, it is striking and quite sobering and concerning, the state in particular of the Drummonds security, sewage works, and the commitment to take that forward urgently is really important. And if you take the port and the hospital together, I think by a rough calculation with the new figure for the port, you're talking about 55 million UK pounds, something of that order, I think it is. And if those are that's all being invested and deployed in the coming, 18 months to 3 years, in Montserrat terms, that's a really big economic injection. So I think obviously there's a lot of challenges, COVID, etc., but that's a huge boost in the offing for Montserrat. I would also just like to reiterate the thanks to the public service. Being a public servant can sometimes be quite tough, and it's particularly tough here, tough job here. Small public service expected to do the functions of a fully independent nation, the international dimensions of that in many cases as well. And I think the public service does it really valiantly. I'm very, very proud to have been associated with the public service here and to see them in action in all the presentations they've done. As the Premier says, there is an issue with public service remuneration. It's too complex, the allowance structure, far too complex here. We haven't rightly been able to grip it and come to firm decisions. That's not what the FAM was ever intended to do. But the commitment to have a really good hard look at that and the scoping out of the main areas to be looked at, I think, has been another element of big progress. Minister Cranston and his team also raised the issue of agriculture and the real need to push and promote agricultural production, rejuvenated here on the island. it is striking when you come to the island as a governor and you get your briefing about the limes of the past, the best limes in the world, Rose's lime juice cordial made here. Some of the purest water ever measured comes out of the Central Hills. Malvern Spa water quality water comes out of our hills. And of course, Sea Island cotton and things like that here. So this is a huge potential resource to tap. And I think, as colleagues were commenting, the big environmental funds that are flowing from COP26 and the climate change agenda are another huge well of potential funding to be tapped into for Montserrat. We should look at that. Two last thoughts. Omicron, as Adam was saying, this is a worrying development. I mean, in many ways, it's more than that. It's almost after 2 years into the pandemic. It's like it's starting again at us in a different form, possibly a form which is less lethal, possibly, we're hearing, but certainly a form which is hugely more infectious and has a big resistance, I'm afraid, to the vaccines, including AZ. So for us on Montserrat, we've had AZ, thanks to FCDO colleagues for delivering that to us. This Pfizer shipment and boosters are really absolutely existential for us. So I would just reinforce that point. Please, please, everybody, if you haven't, get ready, don't doubt, get your arm out, get your booster ready. And then just lastly, on a personal note, thank you very much, Adam, for your warm words. My wife and daughter and myself are deeply sad at the prospect of moving from Montserrat. It's been a fantastic experience for us professionally and personally. I think everyone who comes to the island really feels so welcomed, and it's always a very special place. But for us, at the end of quite a long diplomatic career of many postings, this is a hugely special place to live and work, and we shall be, I'm afraid, going to the plane in March, probably in tears. We're not allowed to come back under FCDO rules. Keep away for at least a year. You have to keep away, but to not sort of, what's the word, sort of clutter the scene for one's successor. But we will absolutely never forget Montserrat, and we will be back. We've drunk from the Gat, and we will be back. So thank you, folks. Over from me.
Good morning to members of the head table. James White from Radio Montserrat. And I just want to start by asking, because my questions would be hinged on this. What's the primary focus of the financial aid mission?
Hi. Primary focus is for us to get a clear understanding of what's going on here in Montserrat, what the priorities are for the Premier and his team, but also, as the Premier said, aside from the regular pace of financial aid and the capital programme, working out what we need to be doing now and what we need to be thinking of coming down the road. And I think in the past there's been injections of capital, then gaps. So what we need to work out is how we can have a sustained investment in Montserrat, but also, as we've heard, looking at other opportunities to open up other funding from the UK and other sources. So as we've heard, there's been the regular funding coming from the FCDO, but what I'm quite keen to do is open up this funding and expertise from across the UK government and make sure that Montserrat can benefit from that.
Yeah, and the reason why I asked that question, we've had these missions over a number of years.
Yeah.
And we've been tied to a 60% of our budget in terms of financial aid.
Yeah.
And when we look at the situation as it stands now in Montserrat, the economy has literally ground to a halt. And from what I understand is that the British government is here to meet, as they would say, our reasonable needs. Now, we are in a situation where we are struggling. The island is struggling, and I know the Honourable Premier and his team would have explained, the situation on the ground.
Yep.
Now, what is it? I'm looking at new spends, possibility of new spends, because clearly what the funds that we have or we've been given, have been unsustainable, because we find ourselves in various situations, especially in the COVID environment.
Yeah.
So I know that decisions would not be made here. When you go back, what is the basis of what you'll be taking back to your minister to assist Montserrat? Yeah. And I know we mentioned about the new variant, yeah, and to shore up, Montserrat's ability to respond. Yeah. That is one question.
Yeah. So good questions. First of all, we've heard from lots of people in Montserrat that they are finding times are really tough, and tough from the baseline of where they were pre-pandemic. So pandemic on top of that has added a new dimension to that. I've been very clear with the Premier and his team. We actually are in a very difficult time in the UK government at the moment. Our borrowing and debt is at its highest for over 50 years. We've had real terms cuts within spending domestically in the UK. I can tell you personally, we have got some very big tax rises coming in the UK. So my job and my team's job here, and we rely on the support coming from the Premier, his team, and the public officials, is to help us be armed with all of the needs and show the people who have the money in the UK, so we can make the case back in the UK for that continued funding of Montserrat. And if you look at UK ODA funding across the world, there has been real-term cuts, but that has not been the case for the overseas territories, because we've been able to successfully argue the case for why the overseas territories are unique and why we have a special commitment to the overseas territories. But I don't think we should ever underestimate how hard we have to try to justify that ongoing funding. But moving us beyond that kind of situation to help Montserrat springboard, for me, the things, as the governor said, there are things which are kind of renewing, patching up, getting to a good basic standard like the hospital. That has to be sorted. We've been talking about that for far too many years. And the port, getting that investment in. And that's something I'm working really hard on to make sure that that actually comes to fruition.
Fundamentally, we are very much aware that Montserrat is a British overseas territory. Yep. And in terms of support for the island, and we are looking at the fact that Montserrat is in a very unique situation. And I'm wondering, why is it that difficult, if you want to say, for Montserrat to get the necessary support that it needs to really push from, to make it sustainable? Yeah. Why is it?
Well, as I said, other beyond the overseas territories, Montserrat, the only ODA territory in the Caribbean, they have had real terms cuts. We are pushing hard to make sure that that does not happen in Montserrat. But the most important thing I would say is it would be very easy for me to come here and make all sorts of promises and then disappear off and not keep them. I've been here, come here, we've left our families at home. We are working on it to make the case, but also source out the long-promised projects like the hospital, like the port, make sure that we get that proper investment in Montserrat to get the baseline to a good place, and, as the Premier said, help springboard the economy as well.
Good morning, Dwight Sampson, DS Media. I want to piggyback on some of the things that my colleague James would have alluded to. I believe that Montserrat, I have been here for a number of years, and I have been to a number of these press conferences. And at the end of these press conferences, the utterances are almost the same. You hear about the same capital projects over and over and over. And I believe that we're in a peculiar situation at present. And what I'm hearing from you, Adam, is almost the same thing, the same conversation as some of the other islands that are way more developed and have some of the same facilities that we are discussing. This whole bid for construction as being revitalization method for the economy. And while that is amendable and praiseworthy in some efforts, the question is, and the question begs to be asked, is that immediate, and how soon can these projects, if ever, be started? I know the Premier alluded to hospital being started by the end of next year, but and I'm sure that the ministers will tell you that the situation is fluid as it is now.
Yeah.
What is going to happen now
Yeah.
for the people of Montserrat, and how are families going to meet their basic needs when prices are going up and
Yeah.
salaries are not changing?
No, I see that. And one thing I would say, though, is you talk about the capital projects. I remember you being at a press conference 2 years ago when I was here. What's changed since then is we've actually managed to get some of the money spent, which is, so the fibre optic cable, the runway, the control tower, the hot mix plant is on the way from Asia. And the hospital has moved forward more than it ever does now, than it ever has been. We've got to a further stage than it ever has before. You know, the plans are progressing. We're hoping to get the plans finalised and get the shovels in the ground. So I can't promise everything at once, but what I would say is there is a real impetus from us to actually get things done. So it's not just rhetoric, it's projects being done on the ground, which will help stimulate the economy and improve the basic services in Montserrat.
Adam, I like the fact that you would have mentioned some of the challenges underground in the UK presently.
Yeah.
And one may say or suggest that if the situation is as it is in the UK, what about us in the Caribbean? How have these measures impacted us and impacted our way of life? And I guess what I'm getting at, has the FCDO or the UK government has ever considered, in addition to the 60 odd plus percentage given to in the recurrent, maybe a one-off to assist that the government of the overseas territories can at least in the immediate, maybe around the Christmas time, maybe early in the new year, be able to assist families by giving them maybe a one-off or two, so that whatever the economic situations they are faced with, there's some level of assistance, some level of hope. I'm hearing a lot of conversations about constructions and buildings and capital projects, and I admit that those they have their place and they will do good, but at the same time, there are families in need at present, at this very moment. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. What are we doing for them? So my question really and truly is, can the UK government, can you at least say to us that you will take back and look at, even if it's a one-off, or even if half salary for frontline workers, for those that have sacrificed over the last 18 to 20 months on the front line, protecting our countries, our economies, our way of life?
What I would say is, so you raised a couple of points there. So the UK earlier on, I think we provided £3.5 million at the start of the pandemic on top of the financial aid to Montserrat. And then that was delivered through the government of Montserrat. So that was paid initially. And then, sorry, go on. Did you want to come in?
No, I just want you said that that was at the beginning of the pandemic. We are 18 months into a pandemic, 20 months, 18 to 20 months into a pandemic, and so much have changed. Now we're talking about a new variant. Countries are beginning to shut down again.
Yeah.
And as you said in your opening presentation, it's only a matter of time before it gets to us.
Yeah, completely agree.
And that begs for another question. What methods,
But what I would say is, we deliver through the government of Montserrat. The UK government provides the budgetary aid support for 65% of the government of Montserrat. The democratic elected government of Montserrat deliver the services, choose the priorities. That's the way we work.
Good morning, Vinay Bass from 664 Connect Media. Slightly different focus with my question. So COVID-19, for example, represents a threat to food security here in Montserrat. And this is something that I haven't heard mentioned by any of you on the panel. So I was just wondering, how is FCDO going to assist us with our food security issues now and in the future?
Yeah. So we actually had a presentation on this from Minister Bufong and the team in Ministry of Agriculture talking about food security in Montserrat, and also actually getting beyond kind of basic food security, but actually seeing what the potential here is in Montserrat to start hopefully producing more local food, but also get to exporting. And I think even pre-pandemic, I think food security was a problem within Montserrat. And then you see the cost of living on top of that. I know that we're speaking to the Deputy Governor, they're working to get an agricultural advisor in as well soon. But I was terrified walking around the supermarket looking at the basic, not luxurious, the basic cost of household goods here. Is really feel for the average Montserratian there.
So one of the other issues with regards to food security is obviously the option to export, because if we produce a lot of food, we'd want to export some of it as well. But then there's also the issue of Brexit, which has affected our ability to access the UK market. So what is the FCDO going to do in order to assist us and reassure us, for example, that the impact of Brexit and COVID won't reduce the size of our financial aid?
Yeah. So, as I say, we're working on keeping the financial aid. We're not looking at reducing the financial aid. The Premier pushes us quite a lot on the opportunities for exports from Montserrat, and I know the Premier is quite keen to look at how we can use the global FCDO network and the trade champions we have around the world to do that. Brexit doesn't affect the Montserrat's ability to trade with the UK. There are no tariffs between the UK and Montserrat, so.
But what about the rest of the European Union? Because that was one of the main incentives of Brexit, free trade and free movement. So how would that affect us now?
So the UK's and the Foreign Secretary at the moment, Liz Truss, has been a champion of this, going around the world signing all of these new free trade agreements. And what they're doing, looking to put into all of those free trade agreements, is putting a ratchet clause in there that if the overseas territories want to be included in those free trade agreements at a later date, they can do. So it's making sure that the OTs aren't excluded from that, including Montserrat.
So we mentioned a lot about the private sector in your conversations as well, and looking at ways that we can boost our economy through the private sector. Have you had any discussions with the FCDO with regards to increasing the size of our population? Because it's one thing to have a private sector, but if no one's accessing the private sector or purchasing from the private sector is redundant. For example, during the crisis, the volcanic crisis, there were incentives put in place to encourage people to leave the island for safety. Is the FCDO open to assisting us with creating incentives for persons to return to Montserrat to live and work?
Yeah, and it's interesting speaking to people on Montserrat who've got kids, and you always ask them, do you think your kids will stay? And the answer's 9 times out of 10, probably not straight away. I think one of the things we can do immediately, hopefully, is work on the access. Making Montserrat somewhere that's cheaper and easier to get to. And then also that helps bring in, hopefully, more tourism, so you can build up opportunities for young people to work in hospitality and other trades. But I think we need to create the opportunities on Montserrat to not only get young people to stay here, but also get other Montserratians to come back here. And I think until we create those opportunities and create that business environment, that's not going to happen.
I guess.
I think let me just add to this one, just extend on this. What I've said in my sidebar with the other members of the team this morning is the reality is that if we continue to speak about a small population, we're not going to get in place. It's a chicken and egg situation. We have to begin to grow the economy. And that in itself will attract people to Montserrat. And the other way around, we have to also expand our economy. So one way of expanding the population is to ensure that our economy, there's growth in the economy, which will attract people. So there's this chicken egg situation where one depends on the other. Economic growth depends on population, but at the same time, population growth also dependent on the growth in the economy. And so this is how we have to balance this.
I appreciate that too, but economic growth also is affected by the brain drain. So if we have the innovative minds who are leaving the island, those between the ages of 18 to 35 are constantly leaving. We have to find a way to retain the existing population, but also potentially recruit people from overseas as well. So I know when we were developing the island, we had this campaign to recruit people from other islands, for example, to come here and live and work. So I'm just wondering if there's any way that you can assist us with that, because it's not just about Montserratians returning, it's also other nations coming and finding Montserrat a good place to live. So I just wondered if there's anything or any incentives for those people to return. My other question, or my final question really, is just regarding the hospital. I know that we've had conversations like this in the past. We've all been here before. But I'm keen to find out what were some of the reasons or causes for delays in the past, and how can you also reassure us that funding won't be withdrawn or stalled this time around? Because we've had these assurances. We've been here before. We've been to tendering. But what was the reason for the delays in the past, and how can you assure us that that won't happen again? Because we need a hospital.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've been and seen the hospital. I know you need a hospital. And I also think actually that is also part of the thing people would expect to see in coming to live on an island like Montserrat, knowing there's good healthcare, particularly Montserratians returning from the UK or other places. What I can say is I know there's been some discussions on the plans before, which never quite got to fruition, but we've actually got to the stage now where the initial outline plans are being agreed. We need to go to the detailed phase now. The money is there. I have a monthly meeting with the Premier, the Governor, and the wider team to talk about that progress. What I suppose has changed is, I chair those meetings and with the Premier and the Governor, and we push those forward. We say to people in the UK government, we say to people in the government of Montserrat, where are you at with this? Where are you at with the tender? Where are you at with the plan? You've got to keep the momentum up on this. I see it as a top priority. I can give you my word, I will keep pushing it forward as well. And the money is there.
And I can assure you, Vernier, that this is one deliverable that this government has committed itself to. And under no circumstances will we renege on that commitment to the people of Montserrat. As a matter of fact, Adam and the rest of my team will tell you that I've made it abundantly clear that under no circumstances will the £15.5 million be touched for anything else in that program except for the hospital. And we are determined that that is our case. And as he said, the plans, sooner or later, we will be shortly putting a tender for the final designs. And I can assure you and the people of Montserrat that this is a commitment that my government has made, and we will bring it to fusion.
If you haven't already, if I could just add thanks, Premier, thank you. The outline design's already been approved by this committee, and it does look really nice, really good. It sets the sort of broad range of clinical services or functional content, as I think the jargon would have it. That looks good too. It's quite ambitious, includes telemedicine and things. And the nature of the building is a really good design for Montserrat. It's got sort of Caribbean elements with a balcony and attractive use of the natural breezes in that location there. It's good stuff. What's being tendered is the detailed design. So the outline, the range of clinical services is already agreed, finalised and committed to. That's a lot further down the track, I think, than you're thinking when you go back 3, 4, 5 years, when it was even a debate about the location, I think, if I remember.
Mr. Premier, I see we are pressed for time, but I want to just draw you in a little bit on a number of areas that I believe you and your colleagues would have discussed. Part of the conversation was the rising cost of living, as you mentioned. Also, we are looking at housing, and Adam alluded to a maintenance budget. We have a number of our infrastructure buildings that they are in dilapidated condition. I'm looking at a commitment. I know it's good to always conversate and speak of different areas, but I'm looking at commitment. You said that your government is committed. How committed now is the United Kingdom's government to the areas that you would have raised? And I mean, the UK government knows very much what we need in Montserrat. So in terms of what you would have discussed with the areas that I mentioned, geothermal, you said about some options that you would have agreed on. Could you just, elaborate on them for us a little bit?
There is no firm commitment on those areas. We said we had a commitment in terms of September 2 going forward, and of course the intermediary projects, programs like the sewage and water and electricity. We have that commitment to work on those. And we definitely have to find a solution because they're critical for our survival. In terms of housing, we have a minister who's very passionate about housing. I know he has made his case here. We know that there are 2 studies that are nearing completion, and we believe that those have set the stage for the springboard for discussion for the next phase in terms of housing development. In the meantime, every year, and I've said it to FS and other FSs before, that one of the questions we're being asked from time to time, how is our budget benefiting the people of Montserrat, apart from the regular services? And so over last year, for instance, I committed with the FS to provide some financing for small areas of repairs. And this year, again, we're going to be doing that until we can get a larger pool of funds. We have to see how we can use whatever we have, what's in our budget, to help in like repairs and so. There's a broader discussion on maintenance, which the DG and our office and the minister put forward yesterday. And I know Adam and the team is going away with that, because there's need for that maintenance budget. Because if you don't maintain, you're going to lose what you have, and then the final cost is going to be greater. So there's that, they're going to with that discussion. So yes, we are committed. Housing, of course, is critical. I've asked the minister of time and time to look at that housing list that he has and see how we can fine tune it to know exactly what is the requirement on that. And we're hoping that we can use that and the program, the two programs or reports that are coming forward from the maintenance of social housing and the management of social housing as a springboard for negotiation for that kind of work. I hope that answers it.
I don't know if it helps, James, but as Adam was confirming, the Drummond sewage works we have effectively committed to. I mean, so the SIPREC committee, the steering committee that Adam mentioned, needs to meet to sort of formally approve it, but the seriousness of that is recognised. There are 3 others, of course, to look at, but Drummond's, because of the immediacy of it, is a sort of thing in the bag, as it were.
Mr. Premier, in terms of access, and if we are trying to develop a tourism product, you know, access is critical. Adam would have mentioned a little bit. How forcefully were you able to put forward, you know, the access issue? And you touched a little bit on the port development. And once we have a port and an airport, that's good. A proper airport, I must say, that is good for tourism and economic development in the long run. Just before I make my exit, the solar plant at Lookout, what is the situation with that? And added on to that, you mentioned the options for this other genset. You know, what are we going to do in the interim with that? We're having serious outages. And I'm saying that because on a daily basis, I live in Lookout, on a daily basis, we have that issue with power outages. What are we going to do in the interim while you negotiate for a proper solution?
Okay, let me start with, I'm no expert on solar, but because I'm sitting here, I will have to answer. What I understand is that the solar panel, it was fed into the grid. And over the past months when we had this blackout, there are some switches that got damaged. As a result of that impeded the function. So those switches are now on island and will be installed. So that should be up and running again. And that's the short story of that. In terms of the interim and the medium-term strategy for maintaining supplies of electricity, we had 3 options. And we are committed to the GenSec may not be the #1 option, although it came as #1, it's the easiest way out. But from our standpoint, in terms of the availability of funds, that may not be #1. The other options that they presented in terms of a total overhaul of the system and moving one GenSec from outside to inside to us is a more affordable option for us. And so we will be looking at that. We think that is, and we are told that if we can do that total overhaul of the generators and move the other one, Gen 5, one inside, what the number is, that should give us a 3-year break. sustain us for another 3-year period. By then, we'll be able to develop a more long-term strategy in terms of moving forward, whether it's solar or energy. So we have that plan. We think that that is affordable, and we'll be working on that. However, the budget must be tweaked. And you have to realize that when there are demands on the budget, you have to determine what you're going to drop out and what you're going to put in, what you're going to cut. If electricity is critical for us, for survival, then clearly something must be given up, must be given up in order to do that, and we'll have to look at that. That's the function of the FS, to determine what she wants to cut to give us that kind of money. But I'm not putting on the spot. But that's the role we have to do. There's nothing, you cannot increase your allocation or your call on the budget without giving up something. And so if we want electricity, it means that we have to determine what are we going to give up for that, and we will have to give up something. And that's the third point. That's the 3 points you asked, right? 2? Yeah, thank you.
And with that, I believe that brings us to the end of our press conference. I'll turn to the panel. Do you have any closing remarks before we say goodbye?
No, just thank you very much for the welcome in Montserrat, but also to the press. You know, to have a modern, functioning democracy, it's really important that you guys exist and do the things you're doing and asking those difficult questions. So thank you for all you do as well.
I thank you very much. I think I like the questions that you asked. I'm going to put the try. I think James and Dwight and 64, Vonier, did some very fantastic questions. I want to thank you for coming. Yes, rest assured that my administration is determined to work on your behalf. We are working with the FCDO team. We have meet once a month. We are pushing hard, and you can see for yourself that the Separate Fund program is already completed, and early in the new year, my team will be meeting in some forums and other stakeholders to discuss the way forward in terms of Separate 2. I can assure you that the hospital is going to be built. If there's any notion that it's not going to be built, it will be built. I will promise you that, and if I don't deliver it, then you know what to do with me. But anyhow, that's another commitment. But one of the reasons why and thanks for the FS and the team, you know that FAM used to be held in January. And over the past 5 budget cycles, we were presenting late budgets. One commitment I made last year is that I'm not going to present another late budget. And I think this is an important move in terms of helping us to advance that, bringing forward and ensure that we have a budget on time. I'm certain that by January, we'll have a firm commitment. We have some indication, but we're not taking that as yet. We're hoping that something else will come. But by January, we should have a firm commitment. What the budget is going to be, and we will announce it then. And then we will present the budget in March. Thank you very much.
And with that, thank you very much, everyone. That brings us to the close of our press conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.